Your appointment. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare.
This is CBS Rewind. July 27th, 1979. The release of the horror movie,
Mommy, I want to go home.
The Amityville Horror.
I'm coming apart!
July 27th, 1990. The release of the legal thriller,
Carolyn Paul Amos was murdered last night.
Presumed Innocent.
Some creep got into her place somehow and strangled her.
And July 27th, 1991.
Unforgettable.
Natalie Cole at the top of the album chart with Unforgettable with Love. Featuring her hit duet with her late father, Nat King Cole. I'm Brandon Brooks, and that's Rewind.
When you're trying to hire, all that searching, screening, and interviewing can become its own job. You need Indeed, the end-to-end hiring solution that makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire quality people. Visit Indeed.com/credits.
All sports talk, weekdays at 5.
WGNS, your good neighbor station.
Rutherford County's place to talk. Rutherford Issues with Brian Barrett on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and streaming at WGNSradio.com.
We're back on Rutherford Issues, powered by Middle Tennessee Electric, MTE. State Representative Mike Sparks has never shied away from a microphone, and you were on last hour with Dr. Krause, and you're still here.
I'm sorry.
Are you ever going to leave?
Can you find your heart to forgive me? You know?
No, he was explaining he had a scheduled guest, and that happens, when you host a show,
We had that happen with Tennessee, was it THDA, Tennessee Housing Development Authority? They're probably mad at me for talking about them, but they were supposed to be here, last month?
Yeah, and I mean, I kept getting emails, and maybe it was you they didn't.
Maybe that's what it is. Their press guy called me the next day. He was apologetic, but I do appreciate the great work that Ralph Perry does and Habitat for Humanity does, Randy Allen, and some others over there, because housing's a big issue, as we were talking about with Dr. Krause earlier.
Well, want to remind folks, if you want to watch the conversation today, it's radio on TV. You can go to WGNSradio.com/TV, and it'll take you to Big G TV on YouTube. You can watch there and even listen back to our shows as well as they're archived. What are we going to be in conversation about today?
Well, I've got one of my favorite guys here, one of my superheroes here in the community, Dr. David Urban, who now is Dean Emeritus. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes.
As of 4 weeks ago.
Yes, yes. How you enjoying retirement?
I'm enjoying it. I had a great 10-year run as the dean of the Jones College of Business at MTSU, but I am going back to my roots as an academician, teaching and researching, and it's a good time for me to do it as I close out the rest of my academic career.
Yes, yes.
So you're going from dean to just back into the classroom and doing some.
Yeah, I never left the classroom.
Sure.
Actually, but I'll be a full-time plain vanilla faculty member now.
I'm sure someone has to ask you some interesting questions, though. Where do we keep the toilet paper and all that kind of thing in the building?
yeah. There are some of those things that come up from time to time, but you can't completely deprogram in a month after having been in a job for 10 years. But I'm getting close. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
Obviously, Mike, you kind of had business in mind today.
Well, one thing I like about this guy, not just butter him up, I see a lot of different people, and I see a lot of sometimes disconnect, if you will. I remember Bob Spivey, the late Bob Spivey, used to kid me about using the word disconnect and disparity sometimes. One thing I like about this guy, he is connected. When I first met you, and I talk about God wink moments, and I felt led to come talk to you, and I wanted my son Preston just graduated, so I wanted my son to pursue his master's degree, which he is now, but I wanted him to go right in after finish his bachelor's, and he really didn't want to. But I forgot to invite my own son to come to the meeting with you, which God may have had a plan because I had more time to talk to you.
Right.
I was working on my second book, learn to barter, and I was worried about the national debt. It was $21 trillion, and what he says to me, which is I call it prophetic. He says, Mike, I'm worried about the tuition debt It's hit $1 trillion. Well, ironically, I was with Bob Corker at the country club the next day, and I asked Senator Corker, what are we going to do about this $1 trillion worth of debt? And it sounded really smart, okay, and it made it in the paper, made it in the Tennessean. And your wife tells me the story. First time I'd met your wife, like a couple days after, she says, you open the paper, you get your coffee in your hand or something, you almost spill your coffee. Like, look, I'm the one that told Sparks this. I'm the one that gave Sparks this.
That.
But I call that confirmation. And here's what is so cool. I went to graduate because I hadn't finished my degree yet. And to be honest, I was walking up to your office and I felt so out of place. Like, what am I doing? I'm a lawmaker and I don't even have my college degree. I'm around all these smart, wise academics, like Dr. Urban. And I just felt isolated. He made me feel connected. And then you go on we had a meeting you put together at Embassy Suites. And I don't know if you remember that. And he gets fired up. And I love people get fired up because that's passion. And he says, we got to reach these young people. We've got to catch them with their iPads, the text messaging, the apps. And he points to me. He goes, and we're going to do it while Sparks is in office. You remember that?
I do, yeah.
And I was the only one clapping. All these people are like 70-year-old academics behind me. I think the president was there, and I'm clapping, and they finally joined in.
Yeah. Well, that was both of those things you mentioned, Mike, are pretty interesting. First of all, when we talked 10 years ago about the explosion in student loan debt, and what a lot of people don't realize is there's more student loan debt out there right now than there is credit card debt.
Wow.
Which is kind of staggering, but interesting that we had that conversation 10 years ago, and look what a political football the entire student loan issue has become over the last couple of years. So I find that very interesting that we had that conversation 10 years ago and things have turned out the way they have.
Yeah.
Along with that, if you think about the things that I was talking about in that speech you mentioned about how we needed to reach students in non-traditional ways electronically, then we had COVID and we were forced into doing that. And now the issue is not just whether we reach students electronically with classroom materials and other ways to interact, but now the whole issue of artificial intelligence is out there, and the impact that that's going to have on higher education that we're already feeling. So there are all kinds of things that are out there, and maybe it was just prophetic, Mike, that we had those conversations 10 years ago.
Yes.
What did you say the debt was?
Oh, now, it was $1 trillion when I first met with him. Now it's $1.8 trillion and something. You can pull it up. Look at the debt clock, how fast it is. And then the national debt's what, 32.4 trillion.
Yeah, well, it's 32.6 trillion.
Wow.
And climbing. I mean, the U.S. debtclock.org, you can go there and look, and it shows, and you can go to years past and whatnot. By 2027, let's see, it is projecting 43.99.
Yes. I mean, and what's being done about it? Don't you have all the answers? You're a doctor.
Yeah, but I'm not a politician.
Okay.
So,
but we ain't that smart sometimes. You know?
Well, you need to get my economist Charlie Baum.
Charlie's a great
guy. Who's in the legislature representing Rutherford. He's a crackerjack economist. He ought to be able to figure it out for us.
He is.
I mean, talk a little bit about that, because it would seem that a person with that skill set is a very important state leader, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say this, not just about Representative Baum in particular, but just in general. People who have solid academic training, whether it is in medicine or engineering or business, have a lot to contribute in the public arena. And I have known over my time several people who have served in different legislative capacities or local government capacities who bring a unique perspective as a result of that. It's what we need. I mean, the whole the statement "it takes a village" is really overused, but the truth of the matter is that to solve some of these issues that we have to deal with in our country, we're going to need the best minds we can put together from all manner of sectors, not just government.
Sure.
So but it is interesting how these things tool around. The good thing about being in my new position, Mike, as just a regular faculty member, is that it gives me an opportunity to think. And sometimes I remember The Wizard of Oz, and I remember the Scarecrow getting the honorary degree of THD, Doctor of Thinkology, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm getting back into now. So it gives me an opportunity to think about these things. Mike, you may not know this, but when I started my career in administration, my first job was to run the Survey Research Laboratory at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, and I had been on the faculty there for a long time, and I did a lot of political polling. And what's interesting is that now, as we're gearing up toward the 2024 presidential election, I'm starting to feel those spider senses starting to tingle again. Back.
What's weird is that was my next question to you, is about that.
So go for it.
It seems that the news we hear about the economy is cyclical sometimes, and right before a big national election like a presidential election, like I did our business report just a moment ago, and the Fed did their rate hike, but the economy is economists are, we feel like this is the last one, we're pulling out, and things kind of seem to get better riding into a national election. And
right.
You hear terms like for the first time ever, but I've had other economists and money managers and all say, you can look back over history and see this a million times, right before elections. So.
Right. I think that's true. I think a lot of times we forget about some of the historical lessons we can learn from these past situations, and I think we're in that kind of situation now. I mean, I find it interesting that just a few months ago I was listening to one of the CEOs of one of the major New York banks on one of the business channels talking about how there was no doubt that we were going to be in a recession within 6 months, and we're not. And I was looking at another network yesterday, and there was a prediction on a worldwide scale that worldwide there's going to be a relatively soft landing, to all of this. So, I mean, it is. It's a very. I'm not an economist, and that was my choice because, but it is a. I think a lot of times, predicting these things is kind of like predicting the weather. It's. It really is kind of a. They don't call it the dismal science for nothing.
Sure, I would guess that would be true.
But I do think there are a lot of really interesting issues coming up, and I will just say this, without getting sidetracked on the political arena, I think there's a lot left to play out in the presidential races over the next several months. And
it's going to be very interesting to watch the news and how all of that, but the economy is thought to be like the biggest issue. Well, we have a long time to see what the economy is going to do between now and then, right?
Yeah, and the average person out there, has some very basic markers that they use to judge how the economy is doing.
What do you think those are?
I think first of all, it's when you're standing in the checkout line at the grocery store, and you have a basket full of groceries and it's $200, and you say, "Where did my money go?" I think that's part of it. I think part of it is every time you pull up to the gas pump. And I pulled up to the gas pump yesterday. It was like $2.45 a gallon, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute now. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was $2.99 a gallon, and those types of things register with people. And the other thing I think people look at is, we've got an aging population. We've got a lot of baby boomers like me, who are either at retirement age or darn close to it, and they're looking at the value of their retirement plans, their 401ks, their all of those things. Those are the types of things that hit home when people start assessing the question, well, gee, am I better off today than I was yesterday? So sure. I think people boil it down to some pretty basic indicators of how they are doing, and I think those types of things are going to stick with us as we approach the presidential races. I think it'll be interesting to see how the candidates out there are going to be able to connect with the average voter when it comes to coming up with some interesting and important ideas on how to keep our upward trajectory going in the economy.
I'm in my mid-40s, and, in my adult life, so in my lifetime, and I know that it was the case, when I was very, very young, but the inflation that we've seen, it's like a generational impact here. It's, and what I mean by that is, you said $200 for your groceries, and maybe that was $150 just in recent memory. This is kind of like the first time that this generation has had to deal with inflation in this way. Would that be right?
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, my daughter bought a house about a year and a half ago out in Oklahoma and got a 6% mortgage. And she was really complaining about that. And I told her, I said, well, now, the first house I bought back in the 80s, I had a Veterans Administration GI Bill loan, which is the cheapest you could get, and it was 11%. And she said, you got to be kidding me. I said, well, no. And I said, there were people a few years before that who were having mortgages at 18%. So I said, it's all relative. It's all what you're used to. I said, you just haven't experienced some of the stuff that we've seen.
And that was the one that, when I was a very small child, because I, remember my dad talking about how interest rates were really high during that time. And so, but it's interesting that what I guess mid to late 70s is when we saw that inflation becoming a real issue. And then here we are now. So it's in my lifetime for the first time as an adult with money.
Yeah. I think if we want to go back and think about history and think about what we are experiencing today relative to history, we might want to go back and look at the late 70s, not just in terms of the economy, inflation, interest rates, et cetera, but things like our political standing in the world, unrest, in terms of the global conflicts, all kinds of things out there. There are a lot of similarities between now and the late 1970s. And I've seen some commentators latching onto that, and at least one candidate has latched onto that, whom I saw on TV yesterday on the Republican side, who said, hey, this is like 1979 all over again.
Well, we have MTSU Dean Emeritus, Dr. David Urban, joining us today with the Jennings-Jones College of Business, State Representative Mike Sparks. We're going to take a brief break, come back, and more thoughts on the economy, more thoughts on, I really would like to get your thoughts on how a generational pandemic also, that we're still trying to deal with that economically as well. When we come back here on Rutherford Issues.
Our people, that's the difference. Maples Realty and Auction.
I'm Betsy Maples Taylor with Maples Realty and Auction Company in Murfreesboro.
Maples Realty and Auction offers a variety of auction services, including home, estate, land, farm, bank-owned property, equipment, and personal property auctions. Get in touch for a free no-obligation analysis to determine if the auction method is best for you. More information at maplesrealtyandauction.com or call 896-4740.
Maples Realty and Auction.
If you're looking for an authentic relationship with financial experts who genuinely care about your unique needs, Capstar Bank is for you. Capstar Bank is dedicated to the people of this community. Capstar Bank wants to help you reach your financial goals, because at Capstar Bank, you matter to us. Capstar Bank, 2230 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, capstarbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
With the opening of Ascension St. Thomas Rutherford Westlawn Hospital, you have improved access to care where you live, work, and play. When you visit the emergency department at St. Thomas Westlawn, you'll be seen in minutes, not hours. Private inpatient rooms create a calm, welcoming atmosphere, and convenient outpatient services allow you to see your doctor and schedule routine care easily. Ascension St. Thomas Rutherford is proud to welcome you to Tennessee's first neighborhood hospital. Find out more at ascension.org/St. Thomas Westlawn.
I've got pets.
AmeriCare is Rutherford County's #1 choice in pest control, and it's simple to see why. After calling 893-7111, their staff came to my house 8 years ago when I had an insect problem. They looked at the situation, showed me the areas and what they'd recommend to resolve the problem. After treatment and with quarterly checks, I'm bug, critter, and creepy crawly free. Thanks, AmeriCare.
Call the best of the best to get rid of your pest.
AmeriCare, 893-7111.
Rutherford Issues on News Radio WGNS.
Back here on Rutherford Issues, powered by MTE, and Dean Emeritus Dr. David Urban is joining us today, and along with State Representative Mike Sparks, Dean Emeritus of the Jennings A. Jones College of Business at MTSU. And I know that we talked about inflation, but I did want to talk about the COVID pandemic, because it's really hard to look back over our history and find a time when something impacted the nation and really the world the way that it did economically.
Right, and I think we've gotten a lot of credit for the recovery that we've made from COVID. I mean, when you think about how the stock market tanked, and you think about all the shutdowns that we had, and we're still feeling some of the effects of that. Obviously, in some areas, our supply chain issues still have not completely cleared up, but we have made a pretty good recovery. I think the interesting thing about it is some of the long-term impact that we have seen. So, for example, we've had an entire generation of young people who've been impacted in their educations by having been out of school,
Yes.
having to take online classes, and and I can tell you, as somebody who's been in academia for 38 years, I mean, online classes have their place, but they're not for everybody.
Yes.
And I will just tell you anecdotally from my experience that online classes tend to work better for older students than for younger students. And nowadays we know about a lot of things that we didn't know about when I was going through school. Things like learning disabilities and other issues that impact how people deal with classroom situations. And when everybody's forced into an online environment, that's tough for some people. Some people are going to thrive on it, but there are going to be some people who are going to find that really tough. And
probably a majority would find that pretty
Yes.
tough. Is it a smaller percentage than 50-50?
I think it's a bigger percentage in K through 12 than it would be in higher ed. I mean, in graduate education and business, I can tell you that the growth market is in online education, because people want to be able to go to school and work at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that doesn't mean that that's for everybody, because you got to have you got to be pretty self-disciplined to be able to get through an online class, especially one that does not require you to meet at a certain time via video with your classmates and your instructor. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that generation of students recovers from COVID. One of the things that I noticed in my classes at MTSU that I was teaching is that I had students in the classes I taught when we got back from COVID and actually were in class in person, and they had, for many of them, it was the first class that they had in person. Because they had started right as COVID was kicking in, and so they had experienced nothing except online. And to them, the in-person environment and being able to interact in the same room with their classmates and the instructor was just a godsend to them. I mean, it was really, really fascinating to see how important that dynamic is for a lot of people. And so that's one impact of it. And I think the other impact is in the workplace. I mean, the difficulties that some companies are having trying to get people back into the office environment, even though there is a lot to be said for being in that environment and being able to interact with your colleagues and share ideas. The old water cooler conversations don't necessarily have to be gossip, right? They can be ideas about how to solve problems and other types of things. But people have gotten used to it. I have it's very interesting to me because I'm on the board of a corporate entity back in Virginia, and we typically have our board meetings in D.C. And we have them in an office of one of the major law firms. And we started having those meetings there once we got back from COVID and stopped the online Zoom, Microsoft Teams meetings, right? And you walk into those law firms, and there's nobody there. I mean, it's like a ghost town. The conference facilities are just wide open. That's why we were able to use them. And it was just stunning to me to see how few people there were actually in the office, and that's a holdover from COVID. And
we've seen wages also impact businesses as well, as wages for employees continues to rise, and it's hard for small businesses.
Oh, absolutely, and so I don't think we will be able to completely assess what the long-term impact of COVID is for some time yet. But I'm just glad that we don't have to wear masks everywhere anymore, and we can I can tell you as an instructor, I can teach online classes and it's functional, but there's just nothing like being there in person.
Yeah. Well, very fun conversation this morning. Dr. Urban, thanks for stopping in today.
Absolutely.
And Mike, appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, and you can catch Mike on Sunday nights for Rutherford Magazine. What time you start? 6?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. That's right, 5 o'clock.
In.
And if you want to listen back to this show, you can check the podcast at WGNSradio.com. Just look under podcast and Rutherford Issues, or wherever you listen to audio, and Big G TV, WGNSradio.com/TV.
Hello friends, Lenny Farmer with Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home. More than I can count, we have taken care of families who were totally caught off guard with the